I'm not sure I could live up to all the accolades that I've been receiving. It's unbelievable. I get emotional. When I was a youngster, all I wanted to do was fly. I built model airplanes. I discovered weight and balance. I discovered airfoils. I designed my own. They flew very well. Took my first airplane ride in a J3 Cub. I believe I was 14, maybe 15. Flew all over Morristown, New Jersey, at about 300 feet, maybe a little less. The police were waiting for us at the airport. But this was when the transition from, I believe it was the CAA to the FAA. They didn't have sufficient regulations to put me away forever. All they did was say, don't do it again, which I did later on in life, other areas, but that's how it all started. I became aware of Embry-Riddle through an advertisement. I don't recall where. It could have been in a magazine, newspaper, and decided I wanted to be a real pilot. Came to Embry-Riddle at TMME and Airport and Miami on 36th Street, what they called the chicken coop, and studied there. But as the President Johnson said, that I had to leave early because of death in the family. Went home, had to settle out of state, and by that time my life, the draft, everybody here remembers what the draft was. They were catching up to me, so I said, well, instead of becoming a grunt, excuse the expression, becoming a grunt, I joined the Air Force thinking I could stay out of the mud. I was in the Air Force for a while and became a physiological training instructor, teaching low pressure chambers, full pressure suits, partial pressure suits, ejection seats. I have all the certificates at home. I forgot to bring them here. It's remarkable how many people in the world get to ride an ejection seat. Parachute landing fall, and visited the equivalent of 64,000 feet so many times. I have a logbook of those. No oxygen, no pressure. It's considered space. In my book, I think you'll see a picture of me in a full pressure suit. An Army general, by chance, was one of my students as we were discussing oxygen, the use of oxygen and the necessity, and the problems with hypoxia and whatever. But at any rate, he told me the necessity that the Army needed pilots. I said, well, I'm a pilot. I just didn't have 4 years of official college. He says, well, we'll take you. 2 days later, I was in the Army. 2 days later. He says, or his aide says, well, you're going to primary helicopter school. I said, wait a second, I'm an airplane pilot. How do you spell helicopter? I ended up at Fort Walters. One of my co-students is sitting right here. He introduced himself again today, which is quite a surprise. We were in the same class together. We flew the OH-23D, it's a Hiller, which is a great machine. It was great. It became very easy to fly after the first approximately 8 hours, about right, to learn to hover. After that, it became an aircraft, any aircraft. It could be a Piper Cub, it could be a Beechcraft Bonanza. I knew the navigation skills. So at that point on, it was fun for the rest of my flying training career. Before my training was finished at Fort Rucker, where we took on advanced combat type training in larger and larger aircraft to include the Hueys, one of the officers came into our classroom and said, all those people with prior flying time, raise your hand. I raised my hand along with maybe a half a dozen other the guys. He says, your training here at Fort Rucker is complete. You're not going to finish the remainder of your training. You're going to Fort Benning, Georgia, to join the 11th Air Assault, which became the first air cav that you see in the newspapers and the magazines and the movies with Mel Gibson. No one at that time knew what Vietnam was to become. We thought it was just a troublesome area, not necessarily too much combat. No one told us that you could really get harmed there. But we went because we had our obligation and duty to the military and to our nation. After I arrived at Bien Hoa, Vietnam, they told me, don't stay with your company of the 1st Air Cav. You're being reassigned as a replacement pilot elsewhere. So now I lose all of my identification with this particular company, and I'm on my own again. I was sent to Pleiku up in the highlands, and reassigned again from Pleiku to Quy Nhon, Vietnam, on the coastal area. No one cared to know my name. I didn't understand why. No one cared if I had a bunk to sleep in. And I'm thinking, can this be the military that I know? It wasn't the next, well, that evening we got mortared, I might add. That's a scary event, but at any rate, I hit a bunker, as I was told to do if in case we got mortared. And the next thing, I went to sleep in one of those wicker chairs in the bunker. Next thing I know, I hear all the helicopters cranking up. I said, wait a second, I'm one of the pilots. They took off. The next morning, the commanding officer calls me into his office, and he says, where in the hell were you? I said, they told me to go to a bunker. No one ever told me to come out. That's a true story. And he excused this scenario because he thought, well, maybe I was uninformed, and I guess he blamed it on some lieutenant. I don't know. Then he says, well, we're going on a mission today, and I'm introducing you to Captain Young was his name. We jump into a gunship, a B model Huey, with 2 7-round rockets on either side, 4 machine guns on either side, a door gunner with an M60, and a crew chief with an M60 machine gun. And off we go. I'm in formation, flying on the outside edges of this helicopter company, going to what was described as a cakewalk. I said, well, this is pretty nice. All I have to do is sit here and watch what's going on. As we approached the landing zone, we called them LZs, we dove the gunships maybe 5 or 6 degrees nose low, gained some airspeed, would beat the formation to the LZ. We strafed the periphery of the landing zone with our rockets, machine guns. Then we had B-47s dropping bombs on either side of us. Now you can imagine my first experience with real combat. The explosions, the dirt, the noise, the machine guns, the rockets. And we did it, then we circled around and did it again. By that time, the helicopter company had landed in this LZ with all the dust and whatever else, and I'm thinking, I'm disoriented. I don't even know where I am. I can't make another 354 days of this stuff. Well, that was that particular trip. It took me, I would say, 2 weeks to settle down and begin to know what the heck I was doing. I mean, I could handle the aircraft, but I didn't know north from south. I mean, that's a true story. I was disoriented big time. We learned, or I learned, slowly but surely, how to avoid ground fire. Some of it, you flew what they call nap of the earth. I'm going to tell you, it was treetop level, and we collected coconuts between the rudder pedals of the helicopters. Believe me, they'd come right through the chin bubble. But at any rate, that was one way. The other way was to fly at 5,000 feet. At 5,000 feet to avoid the 50 caliber machine guns shooting at us. The other technique that I used was slowly but surely I was avoiding other pilots because I didn't want to know their names. We're losing a few slowly but surely, some of the other crew members, so I started to retreat from knowing people. I'm just thinking in my mind here. I stayed close to maybe 5 or 6 guys because we knew that if there was an emergency, we would fly down, pick up the crew, do what was necessary. Normally, when one was shot down and they did come out without too much damage to themselves, we would literally burn the helicopter, throw some smoke grenades in it, and in a few minutes the thing was burning. We couldn't leave any of the equipment to the North Vietnamese use, especially the radios. The FM radios, Fox mic, as we called it. I understand the name or the words of Band of Brothers, but I didn't, at the moment, didn't understand the real true meaning. There's a lot of veterans in here, and they know because they've experienced similar problems, similar sights of people getting hurt, damaged, and killed, and equipment being destroyed, that they know what it means when you say Band of Brothers. Here's where I get emotional. Together, the small group would do everything that they could to cause you to be picked up immediately. Break off from a formation, unannounced, whatever it took to bring the guys out. We've done that a few times. I've done it a few times. Break off, pick up the guys out of the jungle, and leave. Together, we could survive this. By that time, I would guess I was about halfway through my tour in Vietnam. Didn't know it at the time. I wasn't necessarily counting the days, but I did have a calendar clicking off the months. When you get very close to the end of your tour, you start counting days. Now, after many, many years, I truly understand Band of Brothers. The guys that served were Second World War, First World War, even some of those, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. I understand what they went through. They understand what I went through. I thank them for their service, and I thank that I had the ability to serve my country. That's the end of my talk. Thank you.